The crosshairs settled on the enemy operator's chest, and Chief Petty Officer Yolanda Achebe did not fire. Her finger rested against the trigger with the patience of someone who had learned that bullets, once released, could not be recalled. Through her scope, she watched the hostile shift his weight, adjusting his rifle toward the stone structure where Dr. Emil Nazari crouched in terror. One shot would end the threat. One shot would also punch through the thin limestone wall behind the target and kill the most valuable intelligence asset the United States had acquired in a decade. The radio crackled against her ear. "Prism, you have the shot. Take it." Master Chief Voss's voice carried the particular edge of a man who had spent 24 years believing he understood everything worth understanding about combat. Achebe did not respond. She was calculating angles that existed only in the space between physics and impossibility. 72 hours earlier, she had stood in the briefing room aboard the USS Bataan and watched the same man try to end her career with a single objection. The fluorescent lights of the amphibious assault ship hummed overhead as Lieutenant Commander Reese Thackeray spread satellite imagery across the table. 12 operators filled the room, and Achebe felt the familiar weight of being the only woman among them. She had carried that weight through BUD/S, through sniper school, through 6 deployments. It no longer bent her spine. Thackeray tapped the image. Dr. Emil Nazari, Iranian nuclear physicist. He has been feeding us intelligence on their weapons program for 3 years, and now he wants out. The regime is closing in. We extract him from this location on the Omani coast in 72 hours, or we lose him permanently. The room absorbed the information in silence. Achebe studied the terrain, her mind already mapping angles of fire, potential overwatch positions, the geometry of the extraction route. Then Voss spoke. "With respect, Commander, I need to address the team composition." Thackeray's expression remained neutral. "Go ahead, Master Chief." Voss did not look at Achebe. He did not need to. Chief Achebe's inclusion on this operation presents tactical concerns. Sniper operations require a level of physical capability and mental discipline that, in my experience, benefits from traditional team structures. The words were carefully chosen, professionally delivered, and entirely transparent. Achebe had heard variations of this speech on 4 continents. She kept her eyes on the satellite imagery and let the silence stretch. Thackeray's response was measured. Chief Achebe graduated top of her sniper school class. Her operational record speaks for itself. She stays. Voss's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Understood, Commander." The briefing continued. Extraction point, timeline, contingencies. Achebe memorized every detail while tracking the subtle shifts in body language around the room. Most of the operators were neutral, professionals who judge competence rather than chromosomes. A few aligned themselves with Voss through small gestures, positioning themselves closer to him, avoiding eye contact with her. One did not fit either category. Petty Officer Second Class Joaquin Medrano stood at the back of the room, and even from across the space Achebe could see the tremor in his hands. He was young, maybe 24, with the look of someone facing his first high-stakes operation. His eyes kept darting to the satellite imagery as if it might reach out and grab him. After the briefing dispersed, Achebe made her way to the equipment bay. She was checking her rifle when she heard footsteps behind her, too hesitant to belong to anyone comfortable in their own skin. "Chief Achebe." Medrano's voice cracked slightly on her name. "I just wanted to say, what Master Chief Voss said in there, that was not right. I do not think everyone feels that way." Achebe looked up from her rifle. The young operator's nervousness radiated off him in waves. She had seen that kind of fear before, the kind that could lock muscles and cloud judgment at the worst possible moment. Before we dive into the rest of this story, drop a comment and let us know what state or country you're watching from. Maybe you know a service member who has had to prove themselves against unfair judgment. She reached into her pocket and withdrew a small, smooth stone, dark gray with a single white vein running through its center. Her father had given it to her the day she left for boot camp. He had called it a worry stone, something to hold when the mind needed anchoring. She held it out to Medrano. Take this. He blinked. I do not understand. You do not need to understand. Just hold it when things get loud. It helps. Medrano hesitated, then accepted the stone. His fingers closed around it, and something in his posture shifted, settled. Thank you, Chief. Achebe nodded and returned to her rifle. She did not explain that the stone had belonged to her father, or that he had died 3 months after giving it to her, or that she had carried it through every operation since. Some weights were not meant to be shared, only transferred when the time was right. That night, she stood on the deck of the Bataan and studied the stars. Somewhere out there, Dr. Nazari was counting the hours until extraction, trusting that Americans would come for him. Somewhere in the ship behind her, Voss was probably cataloging every reason she would fail. She thought about her father, the physics professor who had taught her to see the world in angles and trajectories. She thought about her mother, the trauma surgeon who had taught her that steady hands saved lives. She thought about Terrell, her spotter, whose name she could not speak aloud without her throat tightening. The mission would succeed or fail based on calculations that existed beyond Voss's understanding. Achebe had spent her entire career proving that precision was not a function of gender. In 72 hours, she would prove it again. She turned to head back inside, and Voss was standing in the doorway. The red glow of the ship's night lighting cast harsh shadows across his face. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Voss stepped closer, his voice low enough that only she could hear. I have been doing this for 24 years. I have buried 7 men who died because someone on their team was not ready, was not capable, was not supposed to be there. His eyes held hers with an intensity that went beyond professional disagreement. If anything goes wrong on this operation, anything at all, I will make sure everyone knows exactly who to blame. Achebe held Voss's gaze without blinking. 24 years of service had taught him how to intimidate, but her mother had spent 30 years cutting into human bodies while people screamed, and she had taught her daughter that panic was a choice you simply did not make. I will be where I'm supposed to be, doing what I'm trained to do. Achebe's voice carried no heat, no defensiveness, nothing he could use as evidence of emotional instability. If that is not enough for you, Master Chief, take it up with the commander. She stepped past him and walked back into the ship, feeling his stare on her back like a scope's crosshairs. She did not turn around. Predators chased things that ran. The next 48 hours passed in the controlled chaos of mission preparation. Equipment checks, communication protocols, contingency planning. Achebe moved through it all with the precision that had earned her the call sign Prism, a name given by an instructor who watched her calculate a shot through 2 panes of glass at different angles and asked her how she saw the world. In angles, she had told him, everything is just angles. Her father would have appreciated that. Dr. Okonkwo Achebe had spent his life teaching physics at Howard University, filling blackboards with equations that described how light bent, how force transferred, how the universe operated on principles that never lied if you understood them deeply enough. He had fled Nigeria as a young man, carrying nothing but his education and his certainty that knowledge was the only wealth that could not be stolen. When Yolanda was 7, he had taken her to the roof of their apartment building with a garden hose and a sunny afternoon. He showed her how water could split light into colors, how a single beam contained multitudes waiting to be revealed. That is what understanding does, he had told her. It takes what seems like one thing and shows you it is actually many things working together. The world is not what it appears to be, Yolanda. The world is what you can prove it to be. She had carried those words into every impossible situation since. 40 hours before extraction, new intelligence arrived. Achebe was in the operations center when Thackeray pulled up the updated satellite imagery, his expression tightening. We have a problem. The commander traced his finger along the extraction route. Thermal signatures indicate a larger enemy presence than we anticipated. Instead of a foreman security detail on Nazari, we are looking at a 12-man Quds force extraction team. They're not just protecting him anymore. They are hunting him. The room absorbed this information in silence. 12 operators against 12, but the enemy would have defensive positioning and home territory advantage. Senior Chief Warren Oglesby, Voss's second-in-command, leaned forward. Rules of engagement? Nazari is the priority, Thackeray said. His intel is worth more than any individual operator on this mission, including me. We bring him out alive, or we do not come back. Achebe studied the new thermal signatures on the screen, her mind automatically calculating fields of fire, potential sniper positions, angles of engagement. Something about the enemy positioning bothered her, a pattern that did not quite fit standard defensive doctrine. She pulled up a secondary overlay, comparing the current positions to imagery from 6 hours earlier. The Quds Force operators had moved, but not randomly. They had repositioned to cover specific approach vectors, almost as if they knew which routes the SEAL team would consider. Commander, Achebe kept her voice level. The enemy repositioning suggests advanced knowledge of our extraction planning. Either they have exceptional tactical analysis, or they have intelligence on our operation. The room went quiet. Thackeray studied the overlay, his jaw tightening as he recognized the pattern she had identified. Voss broke the silence. Or maybe they're just competent operators covering logical approaches. Not everything is a conspiracy, Chief. Achebe did not rise to the bait. I am not suggesting conspiracy, Master Chief. I am suggesting we adjust our approach vectors to account for the possibility that our primary routes are compromised. Thackeray nodded slowly. Prism is right. We adjust. New approach vectors, new timeline. I want alternative plans drawn up within the hour. As the team dispersed to recalculate, Achebe felt Voss's attention on her like heat from an open flame. She had publicly corrected his dismissal, and men like Voss kept score. Medrano fell in a step beside her as she headed to review the new terrain data. That was impressive in there, Chief. The way you saw that pattern. Achebe shrugged. It is just geometry. People move in patterns whether they realize it or not. You learn to see the shapes. The young operator was quiet for a moment, then spoke again. Can I ask you something personal? Depends on the question. Why do you do this? Medrano's voice carried genuine curiosity rather than challenge. You could have done anything with your background. Why special operations? Why the hardest possible path? Achebe considered the question as they walked. Through a porthole, she could see the dark water of the Gulf stretching toward a coastline where a frightened physicist was counting down the hours until salvation or death. My mother saved lives with her hands, she said finally. My father saved minds with his teaching. I wanted to save something too, but I needed it to be harder. I needed to know I had earned it. Medrano nodded slowly, his fingers finding the worry stone in his pocket. I think I understand that. They reached the tactical planning station, and Achebe pulled up the terrain data. Somewhere in the ship, Voss was probably planning how to position her where she could do the least good. She would need to be ready for that. 12 hours before insertion, she discovered she was right. The final mission briefing laid out each operator's position and responsibility. Achebe listened as Thackeray assigned Overwatch positions, and when her name came up, she felt her stomach tighten. Prism, you will be positioned here. Thackeray pointed to a location on the map. Southern Ridge, covering the secondary extraction route. It was the worst sniper position available. Limited sight lines, poor angle on the primary extraction path, effectively removed from the main action. Achebe looked at the position Voss had been assigned, an elevated overlook with clear views of the entire operation area. She said nothing. Arguing would only confirm Voss's narrative about emotional instability. But Medrano caught her eye from across the room, and she saw that he understood. After the briefing, she returned to her quarters and studied the terrain data one more time. The Southern Ridge was a poor position for the mission as briefed. But if things went wrong, if the primary route was compromised and the team was pushed towards secondary options, that ridge would become the only high ground with a view of the kill zone. Voss thought he was sidelining her. He had no idea he might be positioning her exactly where she would need to be. The helicopter lifted off at 0100, carrying 12 operators toward a coastline where everything would either come together or fall apart. Achebe checked her rifle one final time and noticed something on the mission manifest that made her blood cool. Her designated Overwatch position had been changed in the final hour. Someone had moved her even further from the action, to a ridge with almost no tactical value whatsoever. She looked across the helicopter bay at Voss. The Master Chief stared straight ahead, his expression unreadable in the red interior lighting. Achebe made a decision. She would follow orders to the letter until the moment those orders would get someone killed. Then she would do what she had always done. She would find the angle no one else could see. The helicopter banked hard over the dark water, and Achebe felt the familiar compression in her chest that came before every operation. Not fear exactly, awareness. The body's recognition that it was about to enter a space where mathematics and mortality intersected. 4 kilometers from the extraction point, the bird touched down in a dry riverbed surrounded by low scrub. 12 operators moved out in tactical formation, their boots finding purchase on terrain that had not changed in 1,000 years. The Omani coastline stretched ahead, invisible in the darkness but present in every operator's mental map. Achebe took her assigned position in the formation, middle of the pack, far from the point team where her skills would have been most useful. She moved in silence, her rifle across her chest, her mind running calculations on the terrain ahead. 30 minutes into the movement, she saw it. The formation was approaching a narrow ravine, the kind of natural choke point that ambush teams dreamed about. Standard doctrine would have pushed them through quickly, minimizing exposure time. But something in the shadow patterns ahead made Achebe's instincts flare. She studied the ridgeline above the ravine, letting her eyes adjust to the darkness beyond her night vision. There, a shape that did not belong to the rock formation. A slight irregularity in the natural line of the terrain. She keyed her radio, keeping her voice barely above a whisper. Overwatch, this is Prism. I have possible hostile positioning on the north ridge above the ravine. Recommend we hold and reassess. Voss's response came immediately. Prism, negative. Satellite showed that area cleared 2 hours ago. Continue movement. Achebe did not argue over the radio. Instead, she broke formation and moved to where Thackeray was positioned near the front of the column. Commander, she said quietly, I need you to look at the north ridge. Second rock formation from the left, approximately 200 meters. Thackeray raised his optics and studied the area for a long moment. His body stiffened almost imperceptibly. All units hold, he said into the radio. Prism has identified possible hostile positioning. Reaper team, confirm visual on North Ridge. 2 minutes of tense silence followed. Then the confirmation came through. Command, Reaper has visual. 2 hostiles in concealed position. They have the ravine covered. If we had continued through, they would have had us in a kill box. Thackeray looked at Achebe. Good eyes, Chief. Voss's voice cut through the radio. Could have been a lucky guess. Those positions were not on any intelligence we received. Achebe said nothing. The enemy's positioning confirmed what she had suspected on the Bataan. Someone had fed the Coods force information about their approach routes. The ambush team had been placed specifically to intercept a SEAL element moving along the exact vector they had been following. The team adjusted course, swinging wide around the compromised ravine. It cost them 20 minutes, but 20 minutes was better than body bags. As they moved, Medrano fell in a step beside her. How did you see them? His voice was barely audible. I was looking right at that ridge and saw nothing. You were looking for people, Achebe replied. I was looking for shapes that did not belong. The human eye processes patterns before details. If you train yourself to see pattern breaks, instead of searching for specific objects, threats reveal themselves. Medrano absorbed this in silence. After a moment, she heard him whisper, patterns. Right. They reached the outskirts of the fishing village at 0215. The extraction point lay on the far side, a stretch of rocky beach where a rigid-hulled inflatable boat would arrive at 0330 to ferry them to the waiting vessel offshore. Between their current position and that beach sat a collection of low stone buildings, narrow alleyways, and somewhere in the maze, a terrified physicist with secrets worth killing for. Nazari's safe house was a modest structure near the village center. Intelligence indicated he had been moved there 3 days ago by local assets. hidden among fishing families who had been paid well for their discretion and their silence. Alpha Team will secure the asset, Thackeray said over the radio. Bravo provides perimeter security. Prism, proceed to your designated overwatch position. Achebe acknowledged the order and began moving toward the ridge she had been assigned. It was even worse than she had anticipated. The position offered a view of exactly one narrow alleyway and a small section of the extraction route. She would be effectively blind to 90% of the operation. She settled into position anyway, scanning her limited field of view through her scope. Below, she could see Alpha Team moving toward the safe house. Voss was with them, his bulk recognizable even at distance. The safe house door opened. A figure emerged, small and hunched with fear. Dr. Emil Nazari. Even from this distance, Achebe could see his hands trembling. Asset secured, Voss reported. Beginning movement to extraction point. That was when the night erupted. Muzzle flashes sparked from 3 different positions around the village. The crack of automatic weapons fire shattered the silence. Achebe watched through her scope as Alpha Team scattered for cover, dragging Nazari with them. Contact, contact, Voss shouted into the radio. Multiple hostiles. We are pinned at the village center. Achebe swept her scope across her limited field of view, searching for targets. She found nothing. The enemy had positioned themselves outside her sight lines, almost as if they knew exactly where she would be looking. Prism, I need fire support, Voss demanded. I have no targets from this position, Achebe replied, keeping her voice steady despite the frustration burning in her chest. Enemy is outside my field of view. Then move to a position where you can engage. It was not that simple. Any movement would take time, and the team was taking fire now. But staying in a useless position helped no one. Achebe made her decision. She broke from her assigned ridge and began moving toward higher ground to the east. It was not a sanctioned position. It was not in the mission plan, but it was where geometry told her she needed to be. As she ran, she heard Thackeray's voice on the radio, strained but controlled. All units, be advised. Enemy force is larger than anticipated. I count at least 12 hostiles converging on our position. 12 against 12. But the enemy had surprise, positioning, and apparently inside knowledge of the SEAL team's plans. Achebe reached her new position and dropped prone, bringing her rifle up. Now she could see the battlefield. Alpha Team was pinned behind a low stone wall. Bravo was engaged on the eastern flank, and Nazari was crouched in the center of it all, a civilian in the middle of a firefight, completely exposed. Through her scope, she tracked an enemy operator moving to flank Alpha Team's position. She led the target, calculated for the slight crosswind, and squeezed the trigger. The round found its mark. The hostile dropped. Prism has engaged, she reported. One hostile down. For a moment, she thought the tide might turn. Then she saw movement on the far side of the village and understood just how bad things were about to get. Nazari had panicked. The physicist had broken from cover and was running toward what he thought was safety, a small stone structure at the center of an open courtyard. He had just placed himself in the middle of a kill box, surrounded on 3 sides by enemy operators. And from her position, Achebe could see that every single one of her sight lines to those enemies passed directly through the walls that now sheltered the most valuable intelligence asset in the region. The radio exploded with overlapping voices. Asset is exposed. Someone get to Nazari. We cannot advance. Enemy has us suppressed. Achebe forced the chaos into the background and studied the kill box through her scope. The stone structure where Nazari had taken shelter was barely larger than a garden shed, its walls made of the same ancient limestone that comprised half the buildings in this village. Good for stopping weather, useless for stopping bullets. She counted the enemy positions. 7 hostiles had converged on the courtyard, forming a rough semicircle around Nazari's shelter. 3 more were keeping Alpha and Bravo teams pinned with suppressive fire. The remaining 2 were unaccounted for, probably maneuvering to cut off any rescue attempt. Prism, report. Thackeray's voice cut through the noise. I have eyes on the asset. 7 hostiles surrounding his position. I cannot engage without risk of penetration through the structure walls. A pause. Then Voss's voice, tight with frustration. Then find another angle. That is what snipers do. Achebe bit back her response. Every angle she could see presented the same problem. The physics were simple and unforgiving. Her rifle fired 7.62 NATO rounds. Those rounds would punch through limestone like paper. Any shot that missed or over-penetrated would turn Nazeri into collateral damage. She swept her scope across the courtyard again, searching for something she might have missed. The enemy operators were well-trained, keeping the stone structure between themselves and any obvious sniper positions. They knew what they were doing. One of the hostiles moved toward Nazeri's shelter, weapon raised. Through her scope, Achebe could see the physicist pressing himself against the far wall, as if he could push himself through the stone and escape. Command, hostile is approaching the asset. Achebe kept her voice level despite the adrenaline flooding her system. I have the shot, but penetration risk is too high. Take the shot, Voss ordered. Negative. The round will go through him and into the structure. I said take the shot, Chief. That is an order. Achebe's finger rested on the trigger. The hostile was 5 meters from Nazeri now. 4. She could see his face through the scope, young and hard, the face of a man who had been taught that some lives mattered more than others. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. The world is not what it appears to be. The world is what you can prove it to be. She could prove that her bullet would kill the hostile. She could also prove that the same bullet would continue through the limestone wall at sufficient velocity to kill or wound the man they had come to save. I will not take a shot that kills the asset, she said into the radio. Find another solution. The silence that followed was worse than the gunfire. Then Thackeray spoke. All units, we need to draw enemy fire away from the asset position. Prepare to advance on my mark. It was a desperation move. Advancing across open ground against entrenched positions would cost lives. But it might give someone a chance to reach Nazeri before the enemy did. Achebe watched the hostile reach Nazeri's shelter. He did not enter. Instead, he took up a position beside the door, weapon trained on the interior. They wanted the physicist alive. The intel he carried was worthless if he was dead. That bought them time. Not much, but some. She pulled back from her scope and studied the broader terrain. There had to be another way. Her father had taught her that every problem had a solution if you understood the underlying principles. Light bent, force transferred. Bullets traveled in straight lines until something changed their trajectory. Something changed their trajectory. The thought crystallized in her mind with sudden clarity. She returned to her scope and began studying the courtyard with different eyes. Not looking for clear shots. Looking for angles, reflections, surfaces. The stone buildings around the courtyard were old, built in an era before precise engineering. Their walls met at irregular angles. Metal fixtures, drainage pipes, and window frames created hard surfaces throughout the space. Her father had shown her how light bounced, how a single beam could be redirected through reflection and refraction. Bullets were not light, but they obeyed similar principles. A round striking a hard surface at the right angle would deflect, changing direction while retaining lethal energy. It was theoretical. It was borderline impossible. And it was the only option that did not involve gambling with Nazeri's life. Commander, Achebe said into the radio, I may have a solution. I need 5 minutes. We do not have 5 minutes, Voss shot back. Then I will work faster. She pulled a small notebook from her vest and began sketching. 7 targets, 7 angles. Each shot would need to strike a specific surface at a precise angle to redirect toward its target while avoiding any trajectory that passed through Nazeri's shelter. The mathematics were complex. The margin for error was essentially 0. If she miscalculated by even a few degrees, people would die. She heard gunfire in the distance and knew that her teammates were fighting to buy her time. Medrano was out there somewhere, probably clutching her father's worry stone while bullets cracked past his head. For minutes into her calculations, she heard something that made her blood freeze. A new voice on the radio. Not American. The enemy had found their frequency. The voice spoke in accented English, calm and professional. To the American sniper on the Eastern Ridge. We know you are calculating. We know what you are attempting. It will not work. Surrender the physicist, and your team will be allowed to withdraw. Achebe did not respond. She was too busy rechecking her angles. The voice continued. You have 1 minute to respond. After that, we will breach the structure and take what we came for. If the physicist resists, he will be shot. If your team interferes, they will be killed. This is not a negotiation. This is mathematics. You are outnumbered and outpositioned. The variables do not favor you. Achebe allowed herself a small smile. Mathematics. The hostile commander had no idea who he was talking to. She finished her calculations and raised her rifle. Through her scope, she could see the enemy operators beginning to move toward Nazari's shelter. They were done waiting. Commander, she said into the radio, I have a solution. 7 shots, 7 angles. I can neutralize the hostiles around the asset without any round passing through his position. Thackeray's response was immediate. How confident are you? Achebe settled her crosshairs on the first target, a metal drainage pipe that would redirect her around approximately 47 degrees to the right. Confident enough to take the shots. A pause. Then Thackeray's voice, heavy with the weight of command. Do it. Voss cut in. Commander, this is insane. She's talking about trick shots in a combat zone. If she misses, Nazari dies, and this entire operation is a failure. Achebe heard the words, but did not let them penetrate. She was beyond doubt now, beyond fear, beyond anything except the pure mathematics of what she was about to attempt. Prism going hot, she said, and then she heard the sound that changed everything. The distinctive crack of a high-powered rifle, not from any American position. The enemy had a sniper of their own. The round struck the stone 3 inches from her head, showering her with fragments. She had 7 impossible shots to make, and now she had to make them while someone was trying to kill her. Stone fragments stung her cheek as Achebe rolled away from her position. The enemy sniper was good, 3 inches to the left, and she would be bleeding out on this ridge instead of scrambling for cover. She pressed herself against a low rock formation, making herself as small as possible. Her mind raced through the new calculations. The shot had come from the northwest, approximately 400 meters out. The enemy sniper had elevation on her, which meant he could see most of her current position. Prism status. Thackeray's voice was tight, still operational. Enemy sniper has me pinned. I need to relocate before I can engage. Negative time for relocation, Voss cut in. Hostiles are 30 seconds from breaching the asset's position. Achebe closed her eyes for a moment, forcing her breathing to slow. Panic was a luxury she could not afford. Her father had taught her that fear was just chemistry, adrenaline and cortisol flooding the system. You could not stop the chemistry, but you could choose how to respond to it. She opened her eyes and studied her surroundings. The rock formation provided cover from the enemy sniper, but it also blocked her view of the courtyard. She could not make her shots from here. There was a secondary position 12 meters to her right, a shallow depression in the terrain that would give her a sight line to the courtyard while providing partial concealment from the enemy sniper. Partial, not complete. She would be exposed for approximately 2 seconds during the move, and again each time she rose to take a shot. 2 seconds. The enemy sniper had nearly killed her when she was stationary. Moving would make her harder to hit, but taking aimed shots would require her to be still. The mathematics were brutal. 7 shots. Each shot required her to be motionless and exposed. The enemy sniper would have 7 opportunities to put a round through her skull. Prism, we are out of time. Thackeray's voice carried the weight of imminent failure. Achebe made her decision. She burst from cover and sprinted toward the secondary position, counting the seconds in her head. 1, 2. She threw herself into the depression just as a round cracked through the space where her head had been. She did not pause to celebrate survival. She brought her rifle up, found her first target through the scope, and began the sequence that would either save everyone or get them all killed. The first angle was the drainage pipe, a metal fixture mounted on the corner of a building, positioned at approximately 47 degrees to her line of fire. Her round needed to strike the curved surface at precisely the right point to deflect toward the hostile crouched beside Nazari's shelter. She made the minute adjustments to her aim, calculating for distance, wind, and the deflection angle. The enemy sniper was hunting for her position. She had seconds at most. She fired. The round crossed the courtyard in a fraction of a heartbeat, struck the drainage pipe with a spark of metal on metal, and redirected toward its target. The hostile beside Nazari's door dropped without a sound. One down, Achebi reported. 6 to go. She ducked back into the depression as the enemy sniper's response round tore through the air above her. He had her position now. The next shot would be closer. The second angle was more complex. A stone corner where two buildings met, the surface worn smooth by centuries of coastal wind. She rose, acquired the target, calculated the deflection, and fired in a single fluid motion. The round struck stone and screamed away at a new angle. A second hostile collapsed. 2 down. The enemy sniper's round hit the dirt 6 inches from her shoulder as she dropped back into cover. He was adjusting, learning her rhythm. The next shot might not miss. Achebi's hands were steady, but her mind was beginning to fragment under the pressure. Each calculation required absolute focus, and the knowledge that death was hunting her made focus nearly impossible. She thought of Terrell, her spotter, her partner, the man who had died because she hesitated. They had been in Yemen 18 months ago. A similar situation, a similar impossible choice. Terrell had been beside her, calling wind and range, trusting her to make the shot. But the target had been standing next to a child, a boy no older than 10, and Achebi had frozen. 1 second of hesitation. That was all it took. The target had seen them, had raised his weapon. Terrell had pushed her down, covering her body with his own, and the round that should have killed her had torn through his throat instead. She had held him while he bled out, watching the light fade from his eyes, knowing that her hesitation had killed the best man she had ever known. Terrell's voice echoed in her memory, the last words he had ever spoken. Not your fault. Take the shot next time. Promise me. She had promised, and she had never hesitated since. Achebi rose from cover, found her third target, and fired without pause. The round deflected off a window frame and found its mark. 3 down. The enemy sniper's response was immediate, but she was already moving, rolling to a new position within the depression. The round struck where she had been, not where she was. For more shots, for more angles, and somewhere out there, a sniper who was getting closer with every exchange. She could hear the firefight continuing below. Her teammates were still engaged, still fighting, still buying her the time she needed. Madrano was down there, the young operator with her father's worry stone in his pocket, trusting that she would find a way to save them all. Achebi rose again. 4th target. A ricochet off exposed bedrock, angle approximately 31 degrees. She fired, ducked, heard the hostile's body hit the ground. 4 down. 3 to go. The enemy sniper's next round passed so close to her head that she felt the shockwave against her ear. He had her dialed in now. The next shot would not miss. She had 3 more angles to calculate, 3 more shots to make, and a sniper who would kill her the moment she rose to take them. The mathematics said she was going to die, but mathematics had never accounted for what Terrell had taught her in those final moments. Sometimes the numbers did not matter. Sometimes all that mattered was keeping your promise. Achebi checked her rifle, steadied her breathing, and prepared to rise one more time. If she was going to die on this ridge, she was going to die taking the shot, not hesitating. Never again. 3 hostiles remained around Nazari's position. 3 angles left to calculate, and an enemy sniper who had turned her every movement into a coin flip between life and death. Achebi pressed her back against the dirt and stared up at the stars. The same stars her father had shown her on the roof of their apartment building, teaching her about light and angles and the elegant mathematics that govern the universe. He had made it all seem so simple then. Point a hose at the sun and watch the rainbow appear. The world was just physics waiting to be understood. He had not mentioned the part where physics could get you killed. The radio crackled. "Prism, what is your status?" Thackeray's voice was strained. We're taking casualties down here. The words hit her like a physical blow. Casualties. Her teammates were bleeding while she calculated angles. 3 targets remaining, she reported. Enemy sniper has my position bracketed. I need a solution for the counter-sniper before I can continue. Negative assets available, Thackeray replied. Everyone is engaged. You are on your own. On your own. The words echoed in her mind. She had been on her own since Terrell died. Had chosen to be on her own, refusing to work with another spotter, convinced that isolation was the only way to ensure she never got anyone else killed. But isolation had its own costs. Right now, a spotter could have been tracking the enemy sniper, calling out his position, giving her the information she needed to survive long enough to finish the job. She was going to have to be her own spotter. Achebe closed her eyes and reconstructed the enemy sniper's shots in her memory. The first had come from the northwest, approximately 400 meters. Each subsequent shot had shown minor adjustments, the sniper walking his rounds toward her position as he refined his aim. But there had been a pattern in those adjustments, a rhythm. The enemy sniper was good, but he was also predictable. He fired, waited for her to move, then adjusted based on her new position. He was reactive, not proactive. That meant he would wait for her to rise before taking his next shot. He would not fire blind. It was a small advantage, but small advantages were all she had. She opened her eyes and studied the terrain around her. The depression she occupied ran roughly east to west, with a slight rise at the eastern end. If she moved to that rise, she would have a different angle on the courtyard. The enemy sniper would need to readjust his aim. More importantly, the rise would put a large boulder between her and his likely position. Not complete cover, but enough to force him to reposition if he won a clear shot. She moved. The enemy sniper's round cracked overhead as she slid into the new position, but it was a rushed shot, poorly aimed. He had not expected her to move so quickly. Achebe brought her rifle up and found her 5th target. A hostile crouched behind a wooden cart, using it as cover from the SEAL positions below. Her angle required a deflection off exposed stone flooring, a skip shot that would pass under the cart and strike him from an unexpected direction. She calculated. She breathed. She fired. The round skipped off the stone and caught the hostile in the lower leg. He screamed and collapsed, no longer a threat. 5 down. 2 to go. The enemy sniper's response came faster this time, the round striking the boulder inches from her head. Stone chips sprayed across her face, but she was already moving again, sliding back down the depression toward her original position. She heard Voss on the radio, his voice carrying a tone she had never heard from him before, something that sounded almost like concern. Prism, hostile reinforcements approaching from the north. You have maybe 2 minutes before they reach the courtyard. 2 minutes. 2 shots. 1 enemy sniper who was getting better with every exchange. The 6th target was the most complex angle yet. The hostile had positioned himself in a narrow alley, using the walls on either side as cover. There was no direct line of fire, and the only deflection surface available was a small metal bracket holding a shutter in place. Achebe studied the angle through her scope. The bracket was perhaps 4 inches wide. Her round would need to strike it at precisely the right point to deflect into the alley at the correct angle. Miss by a centimeter, and the shot would ricochet harmlessly into a wall. Miss by more, and it might penetrate Nazari's shelter. The margin for error was essentially 0. She thought about her father again, about the day he had explained the principle of total internal reflection. Light traveling through glass would bounce back entirely if it struck the surface at the right angle. No light escaped. It was all about finding the critical angle. Everything was about finding the critical angle. Achebe made her calculations, adjusted her aim, and rose to take the shot. The enemy sniper fired at the same moment. Time seemed to stretch. She felt the displacement of air as his round passed her cheek, close enough to leave a burn. Her finger squeezed the trigger in the same instant, sending her own round downrange toward the tiny metal bracket. She dropped back into cover, heart pounding, unable to see if the shot had landed. The radio told her what she needed to know. 6th hostile is down. Thackeray's voice held a note of disbelief. How the hell are you doing this? Achebe did not answer. She was too busy calculating her final shot. One target remained, and this one was different. Through her scope, she could see the last hostile clearly. He was not hiding, not taking cover. He was standing in the open at the far end of the courtyard, his rifle raised toward Nazari's shelter. He was the commander, the one who had spoken on radio, and he was done waiting. If she did not take him down in the next few seconds, he would execute Nazari and disappear into the night. But the angle was impossible. There were no deflection surfaces, no ricochet opportunities. The only path to the target passed directly through the corner of Nazari's shelter. Achebe swept her scope across the courtyard one final time, searching desperately for an option she had missed. There had to be something. There was always an angle. Then she saw it. A heat shimmer rising from a metal roof to her left. The thermal distortion was subtle, barely visible, but it would affect the trajectory of a round passing through it. If she accounted for the refraction, if she aimed slightly off target and let the heat shimmer bend her bullet's path, she might be able to curve her shot around the corner of Nazari's shelter. It was not a ricochet. It was something else entirely. Something she had never attempted, had never even considered possible. A shot that bent like light through her father's garden hose. The enemy commander raised his rifle toward Nazari. Achebe could see his finger moving toward the trigger. She had one chance, one angle that existed only in the shimmer of heated air. She aimed at empty space, trusting mathematics she had never tested, and fired. The round left her rifle and entered the heat shimmer. For a fraction of a second that stretched into eternity, Achebe could not breathe. Then the enemy commander jerked backward, his rifle falling from his hands as he collapsed to the ground. The bullet had found its mark, bending through heated air like light through water, curving around the corner that should have made the shot impossible. 7 shots, 7 angles, 7 hostiles down. Nazari was still alive. "Courtyard is clear," Achebe reported, her voice steady despite the tremor threatening to break through. "Asset is secure." The radio erupted with overlapping voices. "Alpha moving to extract the asset. Bravo, cover the northern approach. Someone get eyes on those reinforcements." But Achebe was not listening. She was thinking about Terrell. He would have laughed at that last shot, would have called it the most ridiculous thing he had ever seen, would have demanded to know how she calculated refraction through thermal distortion in the middle of a firefight. She would have told him the truth. She had not calculated it. She had felt it. All those years of studying angles, of learning how light and force and energy move through the world, had built something in her mind that went beyond mathematics. Instinct, understanding, the kind of knowledge that lived in the bones. Her father had called it physical intuition, the ability to feel the solution before you could prove it. Terrell had called it magic. She missed him so much in that moment that her chest ached with it. "Prism, we have a problem." Thackeray's voice cut through her grief. "Enemy sniper is still active. He is repositioning toward the extraction route. If he gets set up before we move the asset, we will be walking into another kill zone." Achebe forced herself back into the present. The mission was not over. 7 impossible shots meant nothing if Nazari died on the way to extraction. She scanned the terrain to the northwest, searching for movement. The enemy sniper had gone quiet after her last shot, probably relocating to a position where he could intercept the extraction. He was smart, disciplined, the kind of operator who would not give up just because his team had been eliminated. "I need to move," she said into the radio. "I will track him and neutralize before you reach the extraction point." "Negative," Voss responded. "You have done enough. Fall back to the extraction point and let us handle the sniper." The word surprised her. Not the order itself, but the tone beneath it. Something had shifted in Voss's voice. The contempt was gone, replaced by something that sounded almost like respect. "Master Chief, with respect, I am the only one with the skill set to handle a counter-sniper engagement. Let me do my job." A pause. Then Thackeray's voice. "Prism, proceed. Neutralize the enemy sniper. We will hold the asset until you give the all-clear." Achebe was already moving before the commander finished speaking. She slipped out of the depression and began working her way north, using terrain features for concealment. The enemy sniper would be expecting her to fall back to the extraction point. He would not expect her to hunt him. As she moved, her mind drifted back to the early days with Terrell. They had been partnered fresh out of sniper school, two young operators who had no idea what they were getting into. He had been from Louisiana, a Cajun kid with an accent thick enough to cut and a gift for reading wind that bordered on supernatural. She had been skeptical at first. A spotter was supposed to be invisible, forgettable, someone who existed only to make the shooter better. Terrell had been anything but forgettable. He talked constantly, told jokes at inappropriate moments, and had a habit of humming Zydeco music while they waited for targets. But he had also been the best spotter she had ever seen. His wind calls were perfect. His range estimations were uncanny. And he had an ability to keep her calm under pressure that she had never found with anyone else. They had worked together for 3 years. 47 missions. Not a single failure. Until Yemen. Achebi pushed the memory away and focused on the terrain ahead. The enemy sniper would be looking for an elevated position with a view of the extraction route. There were only 2 options that made tactical sense: a rocky outcropping to the northeast or a partially collapsed structure near the village edge. She studied both positions through her scope, searching for any sign of the enemy. The outcropping was empty. The structure showed no obvious movement, but something about the structure bothered her. A shadow that did not quite match the surrounding darkness. A shape that seemed too regular to be natural. She adjusted her scope and studied the shadow more carefully. There, a rifle barrel, barely visible through a gap in the collapsed wall. The enemy sniper had chosen his position well, but not well enough. Achebi began working her way closer, using every scrap of cover the terrain provided. The enemy sniper was focused on the extraction route, waiting for the SEAL team to move the asset into his kill zone. He was not watching his flanks. Terrell would have called it target fixation, the sniper equivalent of tunnel vision, deadly for the operator who suffered from it. She reached a position 60 meters from the structure and settled into a prone firing stance. Through her scope, she could see the enemy sniper clearly now. He was young, perhaps 30, with the lean build and calm demeanor of a professional. His rifle was a Dragunov variant, well-maintained and clearly well-used. Under different circumstances, she might have respected him. He had nearly killed her 3 times tonight. That took skill, but respect did not change what needed to happen. Achebi centered her crosshairs on the enemy sniper's head. No deflection required this time. No angles to calculate. Just a straight shot at a stationary target. She thought of Terrell one last time. Of his laugh, his terrible jokes, the way he had pushed her down and taken the bullet meant for her. "This one is for you," she whispered. And then she fired. The enemy sniper dropped without a sound. The threat was eliminated. "Prism to command," Achebi said into the radio. "Counter sniper neutralized. Extraction route is clear. Move the asset. Copy that, Prism." Thackeray's voice carried something she had never heard directed at her before. Admiration. Outstanding work. Truly outstanding. She allowed herself one breath, one moment of something that felt almost like peace. Then she began moving toward the extraction point. The mission was almost over. But for Achebi, something else was just beginning. Something that felt like the first step toward finally forgiving herself for the partner she could not save. Achebi reached the extraction point as the first gray light of dawn began to soften the eastern horizon. The rocky beach stretched before her, waves lapping against stones worn smooth by centuries of tide. In the distance, she could see the dark shape of the rigid-hulled, inflatable boat cutting through the water toward them. The SEAL team had formed a defensive perimeter around Nazari, who sat huddled against a boulder with his arms wrapped around his knees. The physicist looked like a man who had aged 10 years in a single night. His eyes were hollow, his hands still trembling from the firefight he had survived. Achebi approached the perimeter and was waved through by an operator she recognized from the briefing. The man gave her a nod that carried more weight than any words could have conveyed. She found Medrano crouched near Nazari, his rifle trained on the village behind them. When he saw her, His face split into a grin that looked almost absurd given the circumstances. Chief. His voice was breathless. That was the most incredible thing I have ever seen. 7 shots. 7 angles. I watched the whole thing through my scope. How did you even calculate those deflections in real time? Achebe settled into a position beside him, scanning the terrain for any remaining threats. Practice. And a father who made me do physics homework when other kids were playing outside. Medrano laughed, a sound of pure relief. My father made me help him fix cars. Somehow I do not think that would have helped tonight. She almost smiled. You would be surprised. Understanding how force transfers through mechanical systems is not so different from understanding how bullets behave. It is all physics. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the boat grow larger as it approached. Then Medrano reached into his pocket and withdrew the worry stone. I want to give this back, he said. I do not think I need it anymore. Tonight showed me that fear is just something you carry until you learn to put it down. Achebe looked at the stone in his outstretched hand. The white vein caught the early light, glowing faintly against the dark gray surface. She had carried that stone through every operation since her father's death. It had been her anchor, her connection to him, her reminder that knowledge could see you through any darkness. Keep it, she said. Pass it on when you find someone who needs it more than you do. Medrano's expression shifted, understanding dawning. That is what you did. You found someone who needed it. Achebe did not answer. She was watching Voss make his way toward them, his bulk casting a long shadow in the growing light. The Master Chief stopped a few feet away, his face unreadable. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The waves filled the silence with their ancient rhythm. Then Voss did something unexpected. He extended his hand. Chief Achebe. His voice was gruff, stripped of the contempt she had grown accustomed to. I have been doing this for 24 years. I have seen operators who could shoot. I have seen operators who could think. I have never seen anyone who could do what you did tonight. Achebe looked at his hand, then at his face. She saw no deception there, no hidden agenda. Just a man confronting the limits of his own assumptions. She took his hand and shook it. Thank you, Master Chief. Voss held the grip for a moment longer than necessary. I was wrong about you. I let my own history cloud my judgment. He released her hand and stepped back. My brother washed out of sniper school 8 years ago. You graduated top of the class the same year. I blamed you for his failure. That was not fair. The revelation settled over Achebe like a missing piece clicking into place. She had wondered why Voss's hostility felt so personal, so visceral. Now she understood. He had not been fighting against her. He had been fighting against the reminder of his brother's inadequacy. Your brother's failure was not my success, she said quietly. They were separate events. Voss nodded slowly. I know that now. I think I always knew it. I just did not want to admit it. The boat reached the shore, its hull scraping against the rocks as operators moved to help Nazari aboard. The physicist stumbled as he walked, exhaustion and terror making his legs unreliable. Medrano steadied him with a hand under his arm. Achebe watched them go, then turned back to Voss. What happens now? Now we get the asset to safety and debrief. Voss's expression hardened slightly, but not with hostility. Professionally. And then I write my after-action report. It will reflect what actually happened tonight, not what I expected to happen. It was as close to an apology as a man like Voss would ever give. Achebe recognized it for what it was and accepted it. They boarded the boat together, taking positions on opposite sides of the vessel. As the engine roared to life and the shore began to recede, Achebe allowed herself to feel the full weight of what she had accomplished. 7 shots that should have been impossible. An enemy sniper neutralized. An asset secured. A team brought home alive. And something else. Something harder to quantify. For 2 years, she had carried the guilt of Terrell's death like a stone around her neck. She had convinced herself that isolation was penance, that working alone was the only way to ensure she never failed another partner. But tonight had shown her something different. She had been alone on that ridge, yes, but she had not been alone in the mission. Medrano had trusted her. Thackeray had believed in her. Even Voss, in his own twisted way, had pushed her to prove herself. Terrell had died, saving her life. She had spent 2 years trying to make that sacrifice meaningless by refusing to let anyone close enough to matter. Maybe it was time to stop. The sun broke fully over the horizon, painting the water gold and crimson. Achebe watched the light play across the waves, splitting into 1,000 colors where it struck the spray. Angles, she thought. Everything was just angles. Even healing. Even forgiveness. You just had to find the right one. The boat carried them toward the waiting ship, toward debriefs and reports and the slow machinery of military bureaucracy. But Achebe was not thinking about any of that. She was thinking about Terrell, about her father, about the long road that had brought her to this moment. And for the first time in 2 years, she was thinking about what might come next. The USS Bataan rose from the horizon like a gray fortress, its bulk somehow reassuring after the chaos of the night. Achebe watched the ship grow larger as the extraction boat closed the distance, feeling the tension in her shoulders begin to ease for the first time in hours. Around her, the other operators sat in exhausted silence. Nazari had fallen asleep against Medrano's shoulder, his body finally surrendering to the stress it had endured. The young operator held perfectly still, afraid to wake the man whose survival had cost so much. Voss sat at the bow, his eyes fixed on the approaching ship. Whatever transformation had occurred on the beach, he had retreated back into professional distance. But the hostility was gone. Achebe could feel its absence like a change in air pressure. The boat reached the ship and was hoisted aboard by crane. Medical personnel were waiting on deck, rushing forward to take charge of Nazari the moment the vessel touched down. The physicist woke confused and disoriented, but the medics were gentle, guiding him toward the sick bay with practiced efficiency. Thackeray was waiting at the edge of the deck, his face showing the strain of a commander who had nearly lost his entire team. When he saw Achebe climb out of the boat, something in his expression shifted. "Chief Achebe," his voice carried across the deck, drawing the attention of every operator present. "A word." She crossed to him, aware of the eyes following her movement. Thackeray studied her for a long moment, as if seeing her for the first time. "I have been commanding special operations for 11 years, he said. "I have seen things that would break most people, but I have never seen anything like what you did tonight. 7 shots, 7 deflections, 0 margin for error." He shook his head slowly. "I did not think it was possible. I am not sure I believe it even now, and I watched the whole thing through thermal imaging." Achebe met his gaze steadily. "It was just mathematics, Commander. Angles and trajectories. My father taught me to see them." Thackeray's mouth twitched in something approaching a smile. "Your father must have been one hell of teacher." "He was." The commander nodded, then turned to address the assembled operators. "Listen up. What happened tonight stays classified until further notice. But I want every one of you to understand something. Chief Achebe saved this mission. She saved the asset, and she saved lives." He let the words hang in the air. Anyone who had doubts about her capabilities should consider those doubts permanently resolved. Achebe felt the weight of the team's attention, but it was different now. The skepticism she had grown accustomed to was gone, replaced by something that looked like genuine respect. Operators who had avoided her eyes on the flight out now met her gaze directly. One of them, a senior chief named Bartlett who had been firmly in Voss's camp, stepped forward. "Chief Achebe, I owe you an apology. I judged you before I knew what you could do. That was wrong." The words seemed to break something open. Other operators came forward, offering handshakes, nods of acknowledgement, brief words of praise. It was not effusive. These were not effusive men, but it was genuine. Medrano hung back until the others had dispersed, then approached with a shy smile. "I told you not everyone felt the way Voss did." Achebe allowed herself a small smile in return. "You did. I should have listened." The debrief took 3 hours. Thackeray walked them through every moment of the mission, from insertion to extraction, documenting decisions and outcomes with meticulous precision. When they reached the portion covering Achebe's 7 shots, he had her explain each angle in detail. She drew diagrams on the whiteboard, illustrating the geometry of each deflection. The drainage pipe at 47 degrees. The stone corner worn smooth by coastal wind. The window frame. The exposed bedrock. The skip shot off stone flooring. The metal bracket holding the shutter. And finally, the heat shimmer refraction that had bent her bullet around an impossible corner. The room was silent when she finished. Even Voss, who had seen it happen in real time, seemed stunned by the technical complexity of what she had accomplished. Thackeray closed his notebook and leaned back in his chair. I am recommending you for the Silver Star, Chief. What you did tonight went above and beyond any reasonable expectation of performance. Achebe shook her head. I was just doing my job, Commander. No. Thackeray's voice was firm. You were doing the impossible. There's a difference. The meeting adjourned, and operators filed out in small groups, heading for racks and showers and the mundane rituals that followed every operation. Achebe lingered, studying the diagram she had drawn on the whiteboard. 7 angles, 7 lives saved, 1 asset secured. And somewhere in the middle of all that mathematics, something had changed inside her. She erased the whiteboard slowly, watching the lines and numbers disappear under her hand. Her father had taught her that physics was about understanding how the universe worked. But tonight had taught her something else. Understanding was not enough. You had to be willing to act on that understanding, even when the odds said it was impossible. Terrell had known that. He had acted on it when he pushed her down and took the bullet meant for her. He had not calculated the odds. He had not hesitated. He had simply done what needed to be done. For 2 years, she had told herself that his sacrifice was her burden, that she owed it to him to carry the guilt forever. But standing here, in the aftermath of her own impossible moment, she realized the truth. Terrell had not died, so she could spend her life punishing herself. He had died so she could live, so she could keep doing the work they had both believed in. The guilt would never disappear entirely. She knew that, but maybe it was time to stop letting it define her. Achebe set down the eraser and turned away from the whiteboard. The corridor outside was empty, the ship settling into the quiet rhythms of a mission completed. She walked toward her quarters, feeling lighter than she had in years. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new missions, new angles to calculate. But tonight, for the first time since Yemen, she felt ready to face them. 3 days passed before Achebe saw Voss again. She had spent the time in the strange limbo that followed every high-intensity operation. Sleep that came in fragments. Meals that tasted like nothing. The slow process of letting her body understand that the danger had passed. On the morning of the 4th day, she found him on the observation deck, leaning against the railing and watching the endless blue of the Gulf stretch toward the horizon. He did not turn when she approached, but she saw his shoulders shift slightly, acknowledging her presence. She took a position beside him, leaving a respectful distance between them. The wind carried the salt smell of the sea and the distant mechanical hum of the ship's engines. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Voss broke the silence. I called my brother last night. First time in 3 years. Achebe said nothing, letting him continue at his own pace. He is selling insurance in Tampa now. Has a wife, 2 kids. He told me he stopped being angry about sniper school a long time ago. Said it was the best thing that ever happened to him because it forced him to find a different path. Voss shook his head slowly. I have been carrying his failure around like it was my own. He let it go years ago. Achebe watched the waves below, thinking about the burdens people chose to carry. We hold on to things longer than we should sometimes. It becomes part of who we are. Letting go feels like losing something, even when that something is hurting us. Voss turned to look at her directly. How long did you carry it? Whatever happened to your spotter? 18 months. Achebe paused. Until 3 nights ago. The Master Chief nodded slowly, understanding passing between them without the need for further explanation. They were not friends. They might never be friends, but they had reached something that mattered more in the world of special operations. Mutual respect. I read the preliminary intelligence assessment on Nazari's information, Voss said, changing the subject. His voice dropped lower, even though they were alone on the deck. The data he brought out is going to change everything. Nuclear program details that we did not even know existed. Your 7 shots might have prevented a war. Achebe absorbed this information quietly. She had known Azeri was valuable, but the scope of what he carried had not been fully explained during mission planning. Compartmentalized information. Standard procedure. I was just doing the job, she said. Voss made a sound that might have been a laugh. You keep saying that, but we both know there is no training for what you did. No manual. You saw angles that should not exist and made shots that should not be possible. He turned back to the water. I have been in special operations for 24 years. I thought I understood the limits of what one operator could accomplish. You move those limits. The words settled over her like something she had not known she needed. Validation from the one person who had been most determined to see her fail. What will you put in your after-action report? She asked. The truth. Voss's voice was steady. That Chief Petty Officer Yolanda Achebe demonstrated extraordinary skill, judgment, and courage under fire. That her actions directly resulted in mission success and the preservation of American lives. That I was wrong to question her assignment to this team. He paused, and when he continued, his voice carried a weight that went beyond professional assessment. And that I am recommending she be considered for team leader qualification on future operations. Achebe turned to stare at him. Team leader. That was not just an acknowledgement. That was a career-defining endorsement. I do not need special treatment, she said carefully. This is not special treatment. Voss met her gaze without flinching. This is me recognizing capability when I see it. You let out there, Chief. When things fell apart and conventional tactics failed, you took charge and found a solution. That is what leaders do. The observation deck fell silent again, but it was a different kind of silence now. Not tension, not awkwardness, something closer to understanding. A door opened behind them, and Medrano stepped out onto the deck. He hesitated when he saw them standing together, clearly uncertain whether he was interrupting something. Petty Officer. Voss straightened up, his command presence reasserting itself. You need something? Commander Thackeray asked me to find Chief Achebe, sir. There's a communication from Langley. They want to speak with her directly about the operation. Achebe exchanged a glance with Voss. CIA involvement meant Nazari's intelligence was even more significant than the preliminary assessment suggested. Go, Voss said. Do not keep the spooks waiting. She nodded and moved toward the door, but Medrano's voice stopped her. Chief. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the worry stone. I know you said to pass it on when I found someone who needed it more, but I think I want to hold on to it a little longer. If that is okay. Achebe felt something warm spread through her chest. The stone had been her father's, then hers, then a gift to a nervous young operator who had needed an anchor. Now, it was becoming something else. A connection, a bond between people who had survived something together. Keep it as long as you need it, she said. That is what it is for. Medrano smiled and tucked the stone back into his pocket. The gesture was small, but it meant something. It meant that what had happened on that ridge had created bonds that would outlast the mission. Achebe followed him through the door and into the ship's interior, leaving Voss alone on the observation deck. As she walked toward the communications center, she thought about everything that had changed in the past 72 hours. She had come aboard this ship as an outsider, tolerated but not accepted. She had faced hostility from the one man whose respect she needed most. She had taken 7 shots that should have been impossible and saved an asset whose value was only now becoming clear. And somewhere in the middle of all that, she had started to let go of the guilt that had defined her for 18 months. The communication from Langley would probably mean more questions, more debriefs, more scrutiny of every decision she had made. But Achebe did not mind. For the first time in a long time, she had nothing to hide. No guilt to carry. No burden to bear alone. She was ready for whatever came next. The communication from Langley lasted 2 hours. Achebe sat in the ship's secure communications center, answering questions from voices she would never match to faces. They wanted every detail of the 7 shots. Angles, distances, environmental factors. The physics of deflection and refraction explained in terms that intelligence analysts could translate into reports. She gave them everything: the drainage pipe, the stone corner, the window frame, the bedrock, the skip shot, the metal bracket, and finally, the heat shimmer that had bent her bullet around an impossible corner. When she finished, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. Chief Achebe, a woman's voice, said, "We have consulted with ballistics experts at 3 different agencies. They are unanimous in their assessment. What you described should not be possible. The margin for error on those deflection angles is measured in fractions of degrees. The heat shimmer refraction alone would require calculations that our computers would need several minutes to complete." Achebe waited, unsure where this was going. The voice continued, "And yet the after-action footage confirms that you did exactly what you claim. 7 shots, 7 kills, 0 collateral damage, in conditions that would have defeated any automated targeting system we currently possess." Another pause. "We would like to discuss your future with you, Chief. When you return stateside, there will be people who want to meet you. Opportunities that do not typically present themselves to operators at your level." Achebe considered the offer carefully. Langley meant desk work, analysis, training others. It meant safety and stability and a career path that did not involve lying on cold ridges while enemy snipers try to put holes in her skull. It also meant leaving the field, leaving the work she had trained her entire life to do. "I appreciate the interest," she said, "but I'm not ready to leave operational status. Not yet." The voice did not sound surprised. "We expected you might say that. The offer will remain open. When you're ready, if you're ever ready, contact us." The line went dead, and Achebe sat alone in the communications center, processing what had just happened. The intelligence community did not extend casual invitations. Whatever she had done on that ridge had attracted attention at levels she had never anticipated. She found Thackeray in his quarters an hour later, working through the mountain of paperwork that followed every operation. He looked up when she knocked on the open door. "Chief, come in." She stepped inside, standing at ease in front of his desk. The commander set down his pen and gave her his full attention. "Langley made me an offer," she said. "I turned it down." Thackeray nodded slowly. "I expected they would, and I expected you would turn them down." He leaned back in his chair. "You're not done yet. I can see it in you. The field is where you belong." For now, she agreed. The commander studied her for a moment, something shifting behind his eyes. "I have been doing this job for 11 years. In that time, I have recommended exactly 4 operators for accelerated advancement." He paused. "You're number 5. Achebe felt the weight of his words settle over her. Accelerated advancement meant fast-tracking through the ranks. It meant leadership positions. It meant responsibility for other operators' lives. "I lost my spotter 18 months ago," she said quietly. "I have not worked with a partner since." "I know." Thackeray's voice was gentle but firm. "I read your full file after the mission. Yemen, Terrell Washington. You took a round that was meant for you." Achebe said nothing. The wound was still there, but it no longer bled the way it once had. Thackeray continued. "The report said you hesitated, that the hesitation gave the enemy time to spot your position. That Terrell died covering your mistake." It was not a question, but Achebe answered anyway. "Yes." The commander leaned forward. "Do you know what I see when I read that report? I see an operator who learned the hardest lesson this job can teach. I see someone who will never make that mistake again." He held her gaze. "Hesitation is a luxury. You learned that. Now you need to learn something else." "What is that?" "That carrying guilt alone is just another form of hesitation." Thackeray's voice softened. "You have been punishing yourself for 18 months, refusing to work with a spotter, keeping everyone at distance. You think that protects people. It does not. It just means that when things go wrong, you have no one to help you carry the weight." Achebe felt something crack inside her chest. Not breaking, opening. "Terrell did not die, so you could spend your life alone," the commander continued. "He died so you could keep doing this work. Honor that. Find a new partner. Let someone in." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with truth she had been avoiding for 18 months. "I do not know if I can," she said finally. Thackeray smiled, the expression carrying warmth she had not expected. "You just trusted your entire team to cover you while you made 7 impossible shots. You trusted Medrano to hold the line. You even trusted Voss to report accurately on what happened. He shook his head. You already let people in, Chief. You just have not admitted it to yourself yet. Achebe stood in silence, processing his words. He was right. Somewhere on that ridge, in the chaos and the calculations and the desperate mathematics of survival, she had started trusting again. Not consciously, not deliberately, but the wall she had built after Yemen had begun to crumble. Think about what I said, Thackeray told her. We will be stateside in 3 days. When we get there will be decisions to make. About your future, about what kind of operator you want to be. He picked up his pen, signaling that the conversation was ending. Whatever you decide, know that you have earned the right to choose. Achebe nodded and turned to leave. At the door, she paused. Commander, thank you for seeing something in me that I could not see in myself. Thackeray did not look up from his paperwork. I did not see anything that was not already there, Chief. I just gave you the space to show it. She stepped into the corridor and let the door close behind her. The ship hummed around her, carrying her toward home and whatever waited there. 3 days. 3 days to decide what came next. For the first time in 18 months, the future felt like possibility instead of burden. The USS Bataan pulled into Norfolk Naval Station on a Tuesday morning, gray skies hanging low over gray water. Achebe stood on deck and watched the shoreline grow closer, feeling the strange mix of relief and uncertainty that always accompanied the end of a deployment. 3 days at sea had given her time to think. About Terrell, about her father, about the wall she had built and the cracks that had begun to appear in them. She had not reached any grand conclusions. Life rarely offered those. But she had made one decision that felt like a beginning. The ship docked with the precise choreography of 1,000 previous arrivals. Operators gathered their gear and prepared to disembark, trading the confined world of the vessel for the sprawling complexity of life on land. Achebe was shouldering her pack when Medrano appeared beside her. Chief. He looked nervous, his hand drifting toward his pocket where she knew the worry stone waited. I wanted to ask you something before we go our separate ways. She waited, giving him space to find his words. Medrano took a breath. I know you work alone. I know there are reasons for that. But I've been thinking about what happened out there, and I want to learn. Not just shooting, the way you see things. The angles. He met her eyes with surprising steadiness. If you ever decide to take on a spotter again, I would like to be considered. The request hit her harder than she expected. 18 months of solitude. 18 months of convincing herself that partnership was a risk she could not afford to take. And here was this young operator, offering to step into the space that Terrell had left behind. She thought about what Thackeray had said, about hesitation, about letting people in. I will think about it, she said. Medrano nodded, accepting the answer without pushing for more. He started to turn away, then stopped. For what it is worth, Chief, I think Terrell would have wanted you to keep going. Not alone, with someone watching your back. The words landed like a blow to the chest. Not painful, clarifying. You did not know Terrell, she said quietly. No. Medrano's voice was gentle. But I know you. And I know that whatever he was, he must have been someone worth honoring. The best way to honor someone like that is not to carry their memory like a wound. It is to carry it like a torch. He walked away before she could respond, leaving her alone with the weight of his words. The ceremony happened 3 weeks later. Achebe stood in a conference room at Naval Special Warfare Command, surrounded by operators she had served with and commanders she had never met. Thackeray was there. Voss was there. Medrano stood in the back, the worry stone visible in his hand. The admiral spoke about duty and sacrifice and the extraordinary actions that defined the special operations community. He spoke about a mission in Oman that remained classified, but had yielded intelligence of strategic significance. Then he called her forward, Chief Petty Officer Yolanda Achebe, for extraordinary heroism in combat operations, demonstrating exceptional skill and courage under fire. It is my honor to present you with the Silver Star. The medal was cool against her palm as the admiral pinned it to her chest. Cameras flashed. Applause filled the room. But Achebe was not thinking about the medal or the recognition. She was thinking about her father, showing her how light bent through water. She was thinking about Terrell, his hand steady on her shoulder as they waited for targets that would never know they were being watched. She was thinking about 7 shots that should have been impossible, and the people who had trusted her to make them anyway. The Admiral stepped back, and Thackeray took his place. His expression carried something beyond professional pride. "There's one more matter," he said. "The operators of this command have a tradition. When someone demonstrates extraordinary capability, when they prove themselves in ways that change how we understand what is possible, they earn the right to a call sign modification." Achebe felt the room shift, attention focusing with new intensity. Thackeray continued, "Chief Achebe has been known as Prism since sniper school, a name that reflected her ability to see angles others could not." He paused, but after what she accomplished in Oman, the operators who served with her have voted unanimously. From this day forward, her call sign will be Prism Actual. The room erupted in applause. Actual, the designation reserved for team leaders. The operators were not just acknowledging her skill. They were acknowledging her as one of their own. A leader, someone they would follow into the impossible. Achebe looked across the room and found Voss. The Master Chief was applauding with the others, his face carrying an expression she had never seen from him before. Respect. Genuine, unreserved respect. She found Medrano next, the young operator grinning so wide it looked painful. He raised the worry stone slightly, a private acknowledgement of everything that had passed between them. After the ceremony, she found him outside the building, watching the sun set over the base. "I thought about your offer," she said. Medrano turned, hope flickering in his eyes. "And?" Achebe reached in her pocket and pulled out a small notebook. The same notebook she had used to calculate the 7 angles that had saved Nazari's life. "If you're going to be my spotter, you need to understand how I think." She handed him the notebook. "Start with the first page. Read it until you understand it. Then come find me, and we'll talk about page 2. Medrano took the notebook like it was made of gold. "I will not let you down, Chief. Prism Actual." She almost smiled. "Do not make promises you cannot keep. Just do the work. The rest will follow." She turned and walked toward the parking lot, leaving him with the notebook and the setting sun. The weight of the silver star was unfamiliar against her chest, but it would become familiar with time. Everything did. If this story moved you, drop a comment and tell us your favorite moment. Maybe you connected with Achebe's journey or know someone who proved doubters wrong through sheer skill and determination. The sun was painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, light bending through the atmosphere the way her father had taught her. Angles everywhere, in the light, in the shadows, in the path that stretched ahead. Terrell was gone. That would never change, but his memory was no longer a wound. It was a torch, and Chief Petty Officer Yolanda Achebe, call sign Prism Actual, was finally ready to carry it forward.